and then turn on.
Begin tonight's meeting by acknowledging that we are gathering on indigenous land. The Salt Lake Valley has always been a gathering place for indigenous peoples, and we acknowledge that the land, which is named for the Ute people, is the traditional and ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute nations, and is a crossroad for indigenous peoples. We pay respect to the elders past and present. We also consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that are our history and legacy, and seek to uncover the truth. For 100 years, the League of Women Voters has been a nonpartisan, activist, grassroots organization that believes voters should play a critical role in democracy. We encourage informed and active participation in government, work to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influence public policy through education and advocacy. Simply put, our mission is to empower voters and defend democracy. We would like to acknowledge 5 new individuals who have joined the League in October. If you are present here tonight, please stand, or if you're online, put a note in the chat. Our new members are, and I will probably butcher the pronunciation of some of these names, so pardon me. Nicole Dykreiser, Aaron Dykreiser, Lise Sorensen, Ulrich Sorensen, and Camille Tranter. A recording of tonight's event will be made available to the public on the League of Women Voters of Salt Lake website and on our social media. Other recordings of this event, whether they be in person or on a computer screen, may not be used without the express written approval of the League. The League will only allow audio-video of this event to be broadcast in its entirety, except by media reporting on this event. Important League announcements and our meeting will be at the end of this presentation. And now to the presentation. I should begin by saying there's been a slight change of speakers since the event was originally announced in our weekly briefing and various community calendars. As program director, I will be providing a brief introduction about the environmental impact statement and record of decision that the Utah Department of Transportation issued regarding Little Cottonwood Canyon and the Gondola. I'll also show a short video produced by Gondola Works that advocates in favor of the gondola. Then we'll turn to our speakers for the evening. And I'll introduce the speakers now. Tammie Bostick is the director of Utah Clean Cities. Tammie received a degree in organization, communication, and marketing from the U of U. Throughout her career, Tammie Bostick has been a driving force behind the advancement of clean fuels and sustainable transportation practices. Under her leadership, Utah Clean Cities has flourished as a catalyst for change, promoting the use of alternative fuels such as biodiesel, ethanol, natural gas, propane, and electricity. Tammie's unwavering commitment to reducing petroleum consumption and improving air quality has helped shape the clean transportation landscape in Utah. One of Tammie's notable achievements has been her instrumental role in expanding clean fuel infrastructure. Tammie Bostick's dedication to community engagement and outreach has also been a cornerstone of her leadership at Utah Clean Cities. Tammie has been a respected voice on the national stage, actively collaborating with other Clean City directors and industry stakeholders, earning her a well-deserved place in the Hall of Fame for DOE Clean City directors. Pat Shea, on my far left, is a native of Salt Lake City. He received his BA from Stanford University, was a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford University, and earned his law degree from Harvard. In private practice of law, Pat has been involved in a wide range of controversial cases, particularly those regarding freedom of the press. Pat has taught at BYU, the U of U, Kansas State University, Westminster College, Stanford University, and Harvard University. Pat has held many political positions as well as governmental positions. Most relevant to tonight's topic, Pat was the director of the Bureau of Land Management and Deputy Assistant Secretary for Land and Mineral Management under President Clinton. Finally, Carl Fisher, to my immediate left, is from Save Our Canyons. Carl grew up among the foothills of the Wasatch Mountains. He enjoys spending time with friends and family, mountain biking, climbing, hiking, fishing, and country snowboarding. In 2005, he graduated from the University of Utah with degrees in geography and environmental studies. He began volunteering at Save Our Canyons in 2001 while working in the hospitality and tourism industries at the Hotel Monaco and Snowbird Ski Resort. He then joined Save Our Canyons staff in 2006. The Wasatch Mountains and their unmatched beauty and access to world-class recreational opportunities are the sole reason the Salt Lake Valley remains his home. He is married, has 2 daughters, 1 dog, and is passionate about protecting public lands, wildlife habitat, and our environment, and likes to have fun. And we hope we'll all have fun tonight. I should start out by saying that the League of Women Voters has a program. Each year we adopt a program. And one thing that is in our program and has been for a number of years is that we promote sustainable lifestyle in Salt Lake, Summit, and Wasatch County's environment, including transportation, housing, use of canyon lands, air quality, and water quality. In our this year's program, we adopted a plan to inform the League of Women Voters through a general meeting regarding UDOT's proposed gondola. And so here we are complying with the program that we've adopted. Sharing screen working. There we go. Okay. I'd like to try to provide a little background information about the gondola. A short history, very short. The UDOT, the Utah Department of Transportation, began an environmental study, environmental impact statement in spring of 2018. This it undertook together with UTA, Utah Transit Authority, and the U.S. Department of Agricultural Forest Services. The study regarded the Little Cottonwood Canyon and the Wasatch Boulevard. And the goal of the study and of the environmental impact statement was to promote an integrated transportation system that improves reliability, mobility, and safety. And this information is taken from UDOT's website. UDOT released its record of decision, it's the ultimate outcome, on July 12, 2013. It selected what it calls Gondola Alternative B with phased implementation of enhanced bus service alternative component. And those of you that are interested can read a lot more on that website. What is Gondola Alternative B phased implementation? The plan UDOT has put forth is phase 1 is improved and increased bus service to meet demand. No road widening, bus stops and mobility hub at the gravel pit, tolling, winter parking restrictions, and this to begin in fall 2025 and to continue at least till 2032. The second phase of the phased implementation is widening Wasatch Boulevard, constructing snow sheds and trailhead parking. And that would be between 2033 and 2043. And then the third planned phase is the gondola itself, to construct a base station, 2,500 parking spaces near the mouth of Cottonwood Canyon, and as I understand it, it's at Lakai, 22 towers, and install gondolas. And that would happen between 2043 and 2053. So that's a ways out. What else did UDOT consider besides gondola B with phased implementation? They considered enhanced bus service with no road widening, which would be pretty much don't change any physical aspects of the canyon, but do better busing. They considered enhanced bus service with road widening. Right now it's 2 lanes, go to up to 4 lanes, which would involve a lot of construction. They considered gondola A, which would put the entrance at the park and ride instead of at Lakai. Gondola B would come into the valley more out of the canyon and start at Lakai. And then they considered a cog rail from Lakai, which also include of construction up the canyon. Why did UDOT select Gondola B? And here's what UDOT says. Reliability. Gondola B is not, the gondola will not be impacted by snow, vehicle slide off, avalanches, or road closures. So even though the Little Cottonwood Canyon might be closed down or the road might have accidents on it, people will continue to move up and down the canyon on the gondola. The other part of reliability would be the parking structure would not require a bus transfer. The second reason UDOT selected Gondola B option is cost. Although there's a high capital cost, they estimate there is a lower operations and maintenance cost with a low life cycle cost over 30 years. So what they're saying is we won't have to employ as many bus drivers. There'll be fewer people employed. Once we've built the gondola, operating it will be cheaper than operating buses. And the third rationale that UDOT presents is environmental impact. They recognize there'll be high visual impact. The gondola towers will be installed up and down the canyon, but they state there'll be low impact to the watershed and no additional barriers for wildlife. The impact to the physical aspect of the canyon, UDOT estimates there might be 2 climbing boulders that would be removed, but they would not reduce climbing, and there would be less physical impact to the canyon than widening the road and building enhanced bus service. That's UDOT's estimation and their rationale for selecting Gondola B. Where to learn more? You can learn a lot more on UDOT's website with the EIS and the ROD. There's a little bit more in the Wasatch Front Regional Council Transportation Plan, because this Gondola B plan that UDOT has adopted is also integrated into the Wasatch Front Council's Regional Transportation Plan. Okay.
I never
Okay. And show. The other thing I wanted to do is play a, I can find where it is. Is play a video, a very glitzy video that Gondola Works, the private company that intends to manufacture the gondolas, has put on its website. And again, you can go to this website, gondolaworks.com, and read a lot of information about why Gondola Works thinks this is the right solution. Now I'm going to try to play this, and in the room, you're just going to hear the sound from my computer, and hopefully there'll be enough sound for this to actually work.
Little Cottonwood Canyon, one of the planet's greatest outdoor wonders and home of the greatest snow on Earth, is Jeopardy. Avalanches, landslides, and traffic have turned Little Cottonwood Canyon into a hazardous roadway. Somewhere out there is an icy road with terrified drivers. When you think about it, the experience of getting to the greatest snow on Earth should also be great. To resolve the congestion of Little Cottonwood Canyon, Utahns have 2 options: transition to clean energy or ride the bus. Canyon expansion for more buses would mean concrete over nature, polluted rivers and streams, displacement of wildlife, and loss of climbing resources. Gondola Works invites you to rise high above the hazards and hassle of the road and imagine the possibilities of a sustainable future, leaving you free to enjoy the scenic journey ahead. Let's do this. Utah must commit to clean energy. It's a no-brainer. The Gondola Works. Gondola works by reducing carbon emissions while also eliminating the need for buses. buses by carrying up to 32 people per gondola car, with cars arriving every 2 minutes. Barrier-free, year-round access in all weather conditions. Choosing gondola means no impact to Utah watersheds, no carbon-heavy road construction, all while preserving 48 acres of Utah canyon land. And Utah gondola supporters are not alone. Other communities also rely on the innovation and efficiency of gondolas to ease mass congestion. From Brazil to Spain, Switzerland to France, they have dramatically reduced their carbon footprint caused by traffic by up to 56%. It's simple. We need to preserve Little Cottonwood Canyon now for generations to come. Utahns deserve clean, sustainable transportation that works, and only the gondola works.
Right. We should have a brief interlude where we're going to be greeted by our mayor.
Well, thank you. I'm triple booked tonight, so I can't stay with you. There are 2 or 3 priority issues for me. This is one of them. The other one is trying to address our human services needs. And we've got a simulation going on in the other building with some leaders in the community to actually show them what it's like to be somebody suffering, living on the streets and trying to make it. So double booked tonight, but I didn't want to leave the building without thanking you. This is a journey, and I think there are 2 important things to do right now. One is let's get on the buses. I'm announcing soon, next week, along with UTA and UDOT, another round of the Cottonwood Connect, and we're going to expand it this year, make it a little more robust so that we can have another option this season, proving that buses and other methods to get up the canyon will work. The most important thing is respectfully reach out to legislators. UDOT's done its thing, very well done in terms of the presentation and the information. This is now in the hands of the legislature, and I hope that they won't pull a fast one and expedite putting the gondola ahead of the phase 1 approach. And it will, I think the more that we reach out respectfully and communicate our concerns, the better. Not only is this, I mean, it makes me emotional just to see that horrible thing moving up the canyon, but it is also a ripoff to the taxpayers. Why would we put what'll be far more than $1 billion into something like this when there's so many other needs? I am firmly in favor of making sure that traffic moves, the neighbors get through this challenge. It's hard on people, the mess at the base of the canyon, but getting more people moving in busing. The buses are changing. We have more options now. Let's reach out. Let's respectfully reach out to legislators. If you have friends who live outside of Salt Lake County who have concerns, family members, if they would reach out, legislators beyond our county's borders need to understand that this is not in the best interest of their residents as well. So just to sum, I have very deep concerns about the gondola. That's no surprise. My staff and I wrote a response to UDOT. We continue to engage with UDOT. We want to work with UDOT right now to make this phase 1 a success. We're also working on common sense solutions which go beyond phase 1. Great partners here all around. Thank you. I appreciate the work that's being done. This is now in the hands of potentially, if there's litigation, that avenue, or legislators saying, no, this isn't in the best interest of our state's taxpayers and our residents. So with that, I apologize. I actually, just to share, I see some friends of my dad, Ted Wilson. He was honored by the US Senate, did that, ran down, went to the other event, knew you guys were here, came to say hi. I'm now catching a flight in a half hour. I leave for the airport to head down to the Utah Association of Counties. Hopefully I see some legislators down there that I can convince on this. So thank you. And I appreciate the coordination tonight. And I heard some news about you I wasn't happy about, but we'll talk later. Thank you.
How do we get that to go full screen?
They're gonna do it. Well, I don't think you do because it's not a PowerPoint. You just have to scroll down
Oh, geez.
because it's not a PowerPoint.
All right. Is this working? Okay, good. Okay, well, thank you. Shauna and I have been longtime friends since college, and she asked me if I would step in and speak about what our initial engagement as Utah Clean Cities was and has been with the gondola. So Utah Clean Cities is a standalone nonprofit. We work with the Department of Energy Vehicle Technologies Program. So anything that's electric, at this point, we work with the blueprint of the national blueprint of our federal government, which has the transportation plan set forth for electrification and zero emissions at the tailpipe. And so my work historically, and Utah Clean Cities work historically, has been with Zion National Park. And so we helped put in the first alternative fuel shuttle, which was a little propane shuttle that operated for 22 years, actually still running in the park. It saved the park 130% of the emissions that would have otherwise been emitted with a diesel shuttle. So with that said, that's my focus. Anything that's not gas and diesel is pretty much what we look at as far as transportation opportunities. As we move forward, we look at hydrogen fuel cells, and of course, those opportunities are on the table, and they're incredibly interesting. So we were approached in 2021 to look at the gondola as a possible transportation system. I was curious. I thought, how fascinating. How many of us have had the opportunity to work with looking at a gondola as a transportation system? So I jumped in with our National Renewable Energy Labs, and we ran the analyses of diesel buses, natural gas buses, also running on renewable natural gas. And we also looked at electric, which at that point in 2021 were not mature enough in their batteries to actually be able to do the duty cycle. It's very steep. So it wasn't really an option, but I also believe that hydrogen would be online at some point. So we ran the analyses of all the different fuels that could possibly be running the buses, and they will be running the buses in the future. So we have to future-proof our bus systems, right? So the propulsion as we move forward will change from diesel most likely. That was the original analyses. So when I looked at it, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to compare. Let's improve the fuel analyses and make sure that we look at it fairly, right, with buses. But I think that the biggest piece that we looked at, I have a kind of a clunky PowerPoint. Okay, so sorry, this is clunky. So this is, we all know that we're working with huge emission. We are in serious non-obtainment for our air quality. We have been. And we continue to be. Our ozone is also under, review by the EPA. So we all know in this room that we have serious air quality issues. So we focus a lot of that. That's our motto is clean fuels, clean strategies, clean air. We're working on tailpipe emissions. 50% of our air quality issues do come from transportation. Of that 50%, you can almost divide that in half. It's heavy duty, medium and heavy duty transportation, buses, semis, delivery, those are the emissions at the tailpipe. So of course, that's a big part of what we look at. So tonight I want to talk about how I was approached to look at this, whether I'm pro gondola or not. I looked at data. I looked at data of busing. I looked at data of the gondola being an electric. We also looked at the sourcing of electric. So our current electric portfolio is mostly natural gas, it's coal, and it has a very small amount of renewables. We know that will change in the future. It has to change in the future. So we also looked at those. So all the metrics come into looking at exactly how these, comparing a bus to a gondola as a transportation system with stops like a transportation system, not two stops at the end of it. So when we looked at it like, that it would have additional stops. It would have a flying deck. There would be an additional stop. So there's are some these. I want to just kind of give you that perspective that this is how we looked at it as a transportation system. We were also given the challenge of the fact that if it wasn't surface transportation, what could we do? So that's why the train was one of the options, right? And also the gondola was off the ground. So something that could withstand, the avalanches. So let's dive into this. I just want to give you that little kind of precursor of where we came from. Cause and effect. Everything we do has a cause and an effect. Oftentimes there are unintended consequences of the choices that we make. Wasatch Front, our topography also affects our air quality. And I'm going to compare that. It's not as smooth as it was early on a click. Zion National Park. So I'm going to look at Little Cottonwood Canyon and Zion National Park. And that was also what they asked me to do. It's like, you work a lot with similar issues in Zion National Park, look at it with Little Cottonwood Canyon. Interesting enough, Little Cottonwood Canyon and Mount Carmel Highway and Highway 9 going into Zion National Park has about the same traffic, on the average of 7,000 vehicles a day going to Zion National Park. Same thing for Little Cottonwood Canyon. Little Cottonwood Canyon is beloved, over 2 million visitors a year. Zion National Park is very beloved, 7.5 million visitors a year. Little Cottonwood Canyon has the red snake. We have the red jam in Zion National Park. Little Cottonwood Canyon has avalanches. There were 98 avalanches in 23. Zion National Park has rock slides. And my dear friend, Jeff Bradybaugh, the superintendent there, says rock falls can happen at any time in this highly erosive landscape. So one of my projects in Zion National Park was to solve for Mount Carmel. It can't be changed. It is a civil engineering landmark, historic landmark. It is 1.1 miles long, and it is a narrow canyon. I was going to show you a great video put together by Utah Clean Cities and the National Park, talking specifically about the Mount Carmel Highway and Tunnel. It was engineered and finished in 1930. And it's very narrow. And so anything like a dually truck can't make it through without crossing over. There are 8 hairpin turns in Zion National Park. There are 2 bridges. There are 18 points in the road where any oversized vehicle crosses over. So we can't change the road. So how do we work with the road? So there are some really, really specific parameters that happen in Zion National Park that are somewhat similar to a canyon that was originally, the road was a mining road, right? So, and we had to solve for the tunnel. This would have been a great fun video to share with you. Sorry, we can't do that, but you can get on our website and see that. So we applied for 4 years ago a Department of Energy Vehicle Technologies program. We wanted to pilot electric shuttles on the east side of the canyon, and that was to prepare for a new visitor center. There's a new visitor center that has broke ground, and we did that in August. It's been in planning for years. It will curate the east side of the canyon. And so again, when we look at the canyon, you have 2 sides of the canyon, 2 million visitors coming in on the average of the east side, 6-7 million visitors coming on the east side. So anyone, you've all been to Zion National Park. Who's all been to Zion National Park? Raise your hand. You've been through Mount Carmel Tunnel, right? So you know the density of that. So we have 2 electric shuttles that can pass one another in the tunnel. So we're not stopping traffic. 75% of the time, the tunnel is closed to one-way traffic because of oversized vehicles. So after 25 years of talking about oversized vehicles, in 2024, oversized vehicles will finally be restricted and have a certain amount of time that they can go through the tunnel. After that, oversized vehicles will not be permitted in the park because of the tunnel and just because of the density of traffic. So I would say that we also are then saying, so what does the experience of the park become if you're on a shuttle? And 80% of the people who ride the shuttle in the park now don't get off the shuttle. they ride the shuttle through the park. It's a touring experience. And so that's also something that we're looking at. It's like, what kind of experiences can we give in the park, given a shuttle system, because it can't be a bus, because buses won't fit for the tunnel. So how do we get, people on shuttles, and how do we have a variety of shuttles that go through the park, right? So we have a shuttle where people stay on the shuttle. We have a shuttle where people can take their gear, their bike, and they're adventuring in the park. It's still to be determined where our shuttles can stop in the park. So it can truly be a transportation system. So from that, intended outcomes, and very similar, I'm very excited. So I also want to say the reason why I'm here tonight mostly is because you're interested in transportation. You're interested in the environment. You're interested in how we grow on the Wasatch Front and in Utah, and what kind of transportation choices we make. That's exciting to me. I wish that we had this much interest in a lot of our other projects that are just as impactful and mean just as much, such as the inland port, the Great Salt Lake, all those things tie in together, right? We have to make the right decisions today. What are our intended outcomes that we want to see in the national park? During COVID, we all met every Friday to say, what kind of transportation system do we want? Because one of the problems with having a gondola proposed is that you can move a lot of people in the canyon. How much density can the canyon take? I mean, if you're constantly moving people, it's just like if we're constantly moving people in Zion National Park, how many is enough? How many is too many? What's the maximum amount? And we've reached those numbers, right? But as a national park, it belongs to all of you. You are the customer of the national park. At what point does the superintendent say, there's too many people in the park? At what point does Little Cottonwood say, that's as many people as this canyon can handle? We've already surpassed that, right? So with that, and I'm hoping with phase 2, we can actively engage and say, how can we make surface transportation work? And again, our research looked at it that transportation services don't work because of avalanches. So that's why we looked very closely at the gondola as being raised above the avalanches and being able to run seamlessly. Another thing that we looked at was Zion National Park that I think everyone should think about when they look at Little Cottonwood Canyon that I haven't heard mentioned much is that there are people who work there. And so similar to Zion National Park, everybody who works in the park, everybody who works in the gateway communities, they have to drive their own personal vehicles into the park. There is no public transportation. And so that 1 in 7 of the vehicles in the park, going to the park, are driven by employees. Same thing with Little Cottonwood Canyon. People are trying to get there to work. They're trying to get out of there to go home. And so there isn't really a system for them either. So with that said, again, similarities with traffic congestion, workforce traffic, please think about that. And then, the barriers to smart mobility. How do we get people to actually work with this phase 1 and work with the buses that are here and the buses of the future? And the transportation opportunities. And then also, again, I mean, some of that thinking that goes into this is how do we not just densify people into one spot? And that's what we're trying to solve for in Zion National Park as well, is that bringing more people, bringing busloads of people and dropping them off at the park and putting them on the shuttle system, it doesn't solve the problems of the park. It doesn't solve the density and the impacts on the park. It just means there are a lot of people in the park and they don't really have much of an experience. So with that, I'm open to questions and conversations when that time comes. I hope I hit all the points. Thanks.
Thank you. I should apologize. We experimented with different computers working with the system, and we discovered only my computer would work with the system. I don't know why. This hasn't been a problem before. So we're all passing my computer around trying to do 3 different PowerPoints. You want to go ahead and go next?
Yeah, and I am not unfamiliar with my my points and my presentations being barred by governmental entities. So, sorry. Oh, PowerPoint. Here we go. I think play. Where's the play button? Sorry. Play from start. Great.
Yeah, so
And I'll apologize. I had this like,
she's got a share screen.
oh, she's got us share screens here for
you
a
go.
second. I had this like dynamic, constantly moving background that didn't transfer over to PowerPoint from my computer because I feel like this dynamic, constantly moving conveyance system up in the air provides this distraction. So that was intentional, but it's not going to come through these slides. So I apologize. I'm happy to send a video format to the League of Women Voters. Anyways, I'm going to fly. I have about 20 slides. So buckle up, and I look forward to engaging with you all on questions. We too looked at a lot of data, and not just energy and emissions in a vacuum, but we looked at ecosystem services. We looked at recreation, where people are going in these canyons, where people are visiting, levels of visitation, carrying capacity, our transportation network that feeds into these canyons, and that drives a lot of the conclusions that I'll be talking about here today as well. But I also want to note that surface transportation doesn't work in these canyons. I find it to be somewhat laughable because under the gondola proposal, over 75% of people coming into these canyons, whether this gondola is built or not, are going to be reliant on that road. So you bet your ass that surface transportation is going to be how people are going to continue to use this canyon. So come with me on this ride. Save Our Canyon's founder, one of my mentors, one of my heroes, helped me into this position and in a lot of regards, for better or worse, the person that I am today. Was quoted in 1974, a couple years after he founded Save Our Canyon, saying, "Good taste is evident everywhere at Snowbird. There is evidence of much sincere concern and goodwill. No one's out to grab the title of Canyon's despoiler. But one must we remember that Snowbird ought to be thought of as what it will become and not what it is now." So that's 1974, 4 years after Snowbird Resort opened. The gorilla has become kind of this moniker of Save Our Canyons. The gorilla was actually an advertisement that Snowbird first put up on a billboard announcing its arrival, this 800-pound gorilla coming into Little Cottonwood Canyon. Save Our Canyon scrubbed the Snowbird wings off of the tank top of the gorilla and put a dollar sign. The founder of Snowbird Ski Resort, Ted Johnson, said upon Snowbird's, or shortly after Snowbird's opening in 1974 as well. That's like 7 years before I was born, for what it's worth. And I'm totally appreciative of all of the people that have put a lot of work into protecting this place. But with planning, concern, and cooperation, Snowbird will be man and nature in harmony in Little Cottonwood Canyon. Just last year, the current general manager and president of Snowbird Ski Resort, Dave Fields, who I'm sad is not here with us tonight, said Utah has chosen to take another trailblazing step towards innovative transportation solutions in order to help air quality, water quality, and the safety in Little Cottonwood Canyon. A gondola is the big idea to take us there. A gondola, 22 steel and iron towers strung with cables and cars pulsing up every 2.5 minutes. Man and nature in harmony. Here's a little photo I took several years ago on a staff hike. Every once in a while, we'd like to go up for a wander in the Wasatch to clear our heads. The presence of Snowbird Ski Resort can't be missed. you can barely hear yourself thinking on top of the Hellgate Cliffs or on top of Flagstaff Mountain because of the roar coming from the circus environment at the resorts down in the canyon below. And now they're proposing to put massive infrastructure, destroying our little Yosemite in Little Cottonwood Canyon. So we ask, when is enough enough? Let's talk about who's using the canyon. In 2015, Save Our Canyons partnered with the United States Forest Service, Salt Lake City Public Utilities, who is charged with the unbelievable task of providing clean, healthy, pristine drinking water. You know, that stuff that runs out of our faucets every morning that we fill our tea kettles with and pour coffee over, or fill our water bottles up or our camelbacks before we go climb a peak. It's their job, it's their mandate under federal law to keep that source pristine. Human impacts are the impacts that they're mitigating against. So what are people doing in these canyons? Well, in Little Cottonwood Canyon, 32% of the usage on a whole. If you look at Mill Creek Canyon, Big Cottonwood Canyon, and Little Cottonwood Canyon, 32% of that pie is dispersed recreation in Little Cottonwood Canyon. 8% goes to Alta and 9% for a combined percentage of 17%. So, you know, a fraction of the cost or of the visitation is going to these ski areas. If you look at percentage of use by resort to dispersed recreation in that area, 30% of the visitation, and this is 2015 numbers, okay? 30% is going to resorts and 70% of the visitors are going to dispersed sites. So if we're going to solve transportation in our canyons, who should we be thinking about? Where are people going? 70% of that use is going to trailheads, to climbing areas, to campgrounds, to picnic areas. We reinforced that recently. I participated in an entity called the Central Wasatch Commission. Pat's there with me. It's challenging work. I'll just leave it at that. But they commissioned a visitor use study, hired Utah State University, partnered with the Forest Service. The Central Wasatch Commission is a coalition of 8 local governments in the Central Wasatch, Mill Creek, Cottonwood Heights, the town of Alta, the town of Brighton, Sandy City, Salt Lake City, Mill Creek City. At any rate, they redid that survey that we did in 2015 to try and update some of these numbers. And so here's what they found. And I just want to share this because I feel this is important context. 1.3 million visitors to Little Cottonwood Canyon, 1.5 million visitors to Big Cottonwood Canyon. So we've often said and known Big Cottonwood has a bigger challenge than Little Cottonwood Canyon, and we'll get there. 400,000 to Mill Creek. And just to put it in context of our entire national forest, the super forest, as we like to call it, the Uinta Wasatch Cache National Forest, because several years ago, all of these forests were combined into one entity, one massive unit that includes the Uintas. It goes down to Nephi, it goes up to Logan. It's a massive area. 6.2 million visitors. Let's look at Mill Creek real quick. 67% of the use in Mill Creek Canyon, hiking. You got some skiing happening there. You got some picnicking that's definitely predominant in that area, but put yourself in Mill Creek just for a second and think about the use, think about the areas, think about the visitation that takes place. And those are the primary activities. All activities, of course, looks a little bit differently, but we asked people about their primary activities and then kind of everything they do up there. Here's a look at Big Cottonwood Canyon. Downhill skiing represents 14% of the use. Hiking represents 62% of the use. Now let's remember that we're spending $1.4 billion for one canyon, and we're ignoring all of the others that have crushing visitation and crushing use. Wildlife viewing. All activities. 11% of the visitation is downhill skiing. Forgot about these things that I put in here. Nature viewing, 1% primary activity, but nature and wildlife viewing representing about 26% of the use in Big Cottonwood Canyon. Let's shift over to Little Cottonwood, which we're kind of here to talk about today. Downhill skiing of all activities, 2%. Downhill skiing, 5%. Nature viewing, 4% of primary activities. Nature viewing of all activities, 19%. Just to give you a flavor, I mean, it's important to understand what people are doing, because in order to understand how to solve transportation, you need to know where people are going. Wildlife viewing, 28% of the people. There's incredible birds, moose. Think about the wildlife that you've seen in Little Cottonwood Canyon. You don't see these things from a gondola, but you potentially lose these things from a gondola. Let's talk about traffic in Little Cottonwood Canyon. So this is UDOT's data, annual average daily trips by year. I apologize that I did this in kind of descending. As it goes to the right here, it declines to my year of birth, 1981. In about 2018, 2019, we implemented 15-minute service in the Cottonwood Canyons. We worked with UTA, when they weren't giving us the excuse of not being able to find drivers. We made it happen. We found money, and we found money for drivers, and we found money for 15-minute service in the canyons. I want you to observe what that did to the curve, what buses did to that curve. It brought us down to 2012 levels of traffic in that canyon. Let's look at, this is a 2015 Salt Lake County, 2012 study from Salt Lake County research in the canyons on traffic. This is President's Day weekend for several years. But you notice that we have 12, just by way of example, 1,200 vehicles per hour. We have approximately 2 people. It's actually less than 2 people per car. On average, 1.8 is what the EIS found. Over a 3-hour period, we got 1,200 times 2 times 3 equaling 7,200 people. Because remember, this 1,200 is vehicles, not people. We need to shift our minds about moving people, not vehicles, right? That is a big paradigm shift that we all need to take. And this was a central theme as we tried to engage with UDOT. They refused to look at moving people. They only thought about looking at vehicles. So if you have a conveyance system that moves 1,000 people per hour, and you have 7,000 people showing up in a 3-hour block, how long does it take to move 7,000 people? Well, it takes 7 hours. So our big solution is to solve a sometimes 2-hour traffic problem and turn it into a 7-hour wait for customers, and that at the cost of $1.4 billion. Queuing was not factored in to this EIS. Let's look at Big Cottonwood Canyon, since we've neglected, Big Cottonwood Canyon through this entire analysis, despite the urging of residents and citizens and organizations. 2,000 people, a little over 2,000 people are entering the Brighton Loop at peak times on average. You can see there are many purple lines here, and I probably should have gone with a different color scheme, but my daughters like purple and pink, so that's what we went with. But 8,000 people entering that canyon is the top of those lines. That faint line here at the bottom, oh, I think you can see my cursor here. is where people are entering the Brighton Loop. What does that tell you? People are going other places than the ski resorts. We have other challenges than simply serving the ski areas in these canyons because people are going other places. And the vast majority, by my simple math, only a quarter of people going into Big Cottonwood Canyon are going to Brighton Ski Resort. What are we going to do with the rest of those people? And that's part of the thesis of what I was talking to you about earlier, with this minority of people going to the ski resorts, yet the lion's share of your taxpayer dollars are going to this gimmick. Now let's get to some of the stuff from the EIS and talk about the mobility hubs. UDOT chose an alternative. Let me back up, and Pat's gonna hopefully give you an education on NEPA. NEPA is all about your purpose and need of your project. The purpose and need, as stated by Linda, was reliability, safety, and mobility. What did UDOT say about a mobility hub with a gondola base at the mouth of Little Cottonwood Canyon? Well, these are their words, not mine. Location would cause congestion on Wasatch Boulevard during peak times in residential area, similar to current conditions. Land is between two residential subdivisions and would not be compatible with a car parking structure. If you look at this graph in the area that I circled in red, they said that the gondola base, the alternative that they chose, did not meet the project's purpose and need and was screened out, yet they chose it anyway. Let's talk about the effectiveness of the gondola. It's not scalable. The system would have 4 stations, each necessary to operate the gondola system. If any part of the gondola system has a mechanical failure, the entire system would stop. How is that reliable? Stranding users at the base station or at the ski resorts. What they failed to note is that there are people in the middle of the canyon sitting in gondola cabins that would also be halted. Avalanche mitigation risk. Quote, current artillery use would require gondola cabins to be outside artillery fragmentation areas during avalanche mitigation operations. This is our conveyance system to address avalanches. After use of artillery, the gondola cables would need to be inspected for damage before any use. With snow sheds on SR210, the use of artillery would be lower compared to the current operations. But while they are doing avalanche mitigation, while avalanche cycles are happening in this canyon, the gondola, by UDOT's own words, will not be in operation for $1.4 billion. So you have all of these out. Here are the avalanche paths in Little Cottonwood Canyon. There are a number of towers situated in these avalanche slide paths. So let's look at what happens potentially when an avalanche hits infrastructure. Here's from last season. Tanner Campground. Familiar with Tanner Campground? Little Cottonwood Canyon. Massive avalanche path pointed right at Tanner Campground. Here's a photo of what it did to the bathrooms. Concrete and brick structures in Little Cottonwood Canyon. They're putting avalanche or gondola infrastructure right in this slide path. The next picture to the right that is just below Tanner's campground, where they're proposing to put have you seen the new angle station at Alta going up to the Supreme lift? Kind of has this kind of winged thing. It's a bunch of, they basically build a wall out of steel beams. That's in this slide path. It moved boulders the size of SUVs. It snapped trees that are bigger than many of us arms linked together could link our arms and go all the way around. This infrastructure is in the middle of these slide paths. The gondola will not only not be able to run while these avalanches are cycling, but if it damages that infrastructure, it takes that mechanism of conveyance, that transportation solution offline until that infrastructure can be repaired. And repaired by who? I'm guessing the people that footed the bill, the taxpayer. Back to greenwashing. Bias towards the bus and trains for that matter. UDOT evaluated an electric gondola system. They ignored electric buses. They actually refused to integrate the electric buses as part of the emissions factors. So several years ago, this is a screenshot from Proterra, who is a electric bus operator. They tested their electric buses in all of the Wasatch Canyons, going to all of the ski resorts, not just in the Cottonwood Canyons, but up to Park City and even up to Powder Mountain and Snow Basin. They found that the electric buses performed much better than the diesel bus. Many of us urged UDOT to consider electric buses. They refused and simply said, I think kind of what we heard earlier, technology is not quite there yet. So there wasn't a shoulder-to-shoulder analysis on the efficacy of busing. So I'm just going to state that the gondola is not a solution for the canyon. It isn't a solution for the resorts either. Its purpose is not to reduce traffic or be reliable or effectively move people. It's to get more patrons to the ski areas at the expense of the taxpayer and to have a gimmick to market something that doesn't really work to tourists, because that is what works. That's in the interest of these ski resorts, and it's to the detriment of our canyons. What would work? Connecting people to our canyons without needing a vehicle. Hard stop. We need to serve all users, all seasons of the year. We need to design a system around the values in these canyons that we seek to protect, whether that's your drinking water, opportunities for solitude, or to give a little space to other creatures that we share this incredible mountain range with. We'd also it gives everyone an option other than their cars well before the canyons to get on transit. It would be a benefit to other people going elsewhere in the van to have a better transit system in our entire valley, whether you're going to the canyons or you're going to work or you're going to the library or you're coming to, I guess, hear myself and others talk at the Salt Lake County building. Our transit system in this valley is atrocious. And I don't think you understand. UTA's annual budget is $650 million a year. And we're spending $1.4 billion on something that doesn't solve the problem. It's a disgusting waste of taxpayer money. We need something that truly benefits the public, warranting public investment and shared economic prosperity. And to that point, I'd encourage you to look at these rough blue dots on this map. But everywhere I put a blue dot on this map, I think should be an area where we have an anchor retail station. We should have cafes. We should have ski and outdoor rental shops, and we should have parking, and we should have employee housing, because the people that are working, I care too about these people that are working at these resorts. And guess what? Because of the cost of living in the Salt Lake Valley, they can't live here because the ski resorts aren't paying them a livable wage. And those nodes need to be developed. But if you have anchors that share economic prosperity rather than concentrate it for those that are building a gondola and those that own ski resorts, but actually wrap this into something that where all of our community and all of our society benefits from protecting the Wasatch Mountains, I think this place has a fighting chance. It wouldn't require development in or around our canyons, and we could protect the wildlands that we so desperately need. And finally, we're not just reducing an 8-mile congestion for people that can afford a ski pass and ski on peak ski days in the canyons, but we'd improve air quality by reducing trips from every single person that wants to get from point A to point B, wherever point A or wherever point B is, by getting on clean transportation. And I wholeheartedly endorse clean transportation, but it shouldn't exist in a vacuum in our canyons. It should exist regionally, and it should benefit every single person in this valley. So our canyons in our community deserve better than a gondola. There are better options and actual solutions that exist if we can simply get those people in power to listen. And I was very encouraged to hear our county mayor talk about that earlier. I think she is one of those people, and there's other people out there. UDOT is not that entity. The ski areas are not that entity. The Gondola Works Coalition is not that entity, but they are out there. Seek them out, find them, support them, and embrace a better future for our region. Thanks.
I think it'd be a good idea for everybody to stand up and take a 2-minute, get the blood circulating again. While you're standing, I would like to recognize a state senator, Nate Bloom, who's here, who's made a huge difference. And I hope that people will pay attention to the elected officials like him, because he's looking to the future, not the past. And he doesn't make deals. In Utah, well, actually, I've worked in Washington 6 different times, and there the motto is pay to play. Here, it's vote to play. And what I mean by that is everything that goes through the Capitol is basically controlled by 2 people, the President of the Senate, Stuart Adams, and formerly the Speaker, Brad Wilson, who was replaced with Mike Schultz today. And President Adams is a developer, and somehow mysteriously, in my opinion, he's able to anticipate where different transportation systems are going to be built so that he can then put a development in that location. You can go ahead and sit down. The other thing I wanted to say at the beginning is I was in higher education for 10 years. I was the first in the family to go to college. And when I finished my last degree, I had breakfast with my grandmother and my step-grandfather. And I told them I was thinking of doing another 4 years. And my grandmother said, no, get to work. And so I did. But Beth said, and she said, she was an elementary school teacher, she said, where did you learn the most? And I said, Dilworth Elementary School, because that really does shape you. Higher education can smooth you out, although many people think that didn't work for me. But you do have a really wonderful education system in Utah, despite our miserly approach to public education. What we fail to pay public school teachers, like Mrs. Sharp, my third grade teacher, and Mrs. Rigby, my fourth grade teacher, is just outrageous. But let's look just at the gondola. And I always like to track down different inside political games. So the first political game I want to bring to your attention is when you, the taxpayers, after the legislature passed a bill to move the prison, President Senate Mansell at the time convinced his colleagues that it would only cost $550 million. It ended up $1.2 billion. And guess what's being developed in an area where he's the real estate agent? The Point. No conflict there. Then we go to his successor, Wayne Niederhauser. And I wish I had his foresight or maybe connections, because he and Chris McCandless from Cottonwood Heights and Kevin Gates from the Chi somehow purchased 23 acres at the base of Little Cottonwood Canyon, and 10 acres of that is exactly where the gondola is going to be placed. And they're going to build a ultra-rich alpine village so that the out-of-state visitors will be able to come in without having to hassle with the plebes, but be able to safely ensconce themselves in a nice French chalet or something. And then Snowbird bought that 10 acres just a while back. And to show you how directed this whole process was, we have memos of a meeting that had happened 2 days before UDOT issued their final alternative or alternates. And Chris McCandless and Wayne Niederhauser met with Carlos, the head of UDOT, and somehow mysteriously 2 days after that, the gondola alternate B was placed back into amongst the alternatives. So it just seems to me, whether it's the parking structures and imagine the traffic getting, and especially if you have kids, getting into a parking structure, moving their skis and boots and everything to a bus to have you taken to the gondola base. Or if you're lucky enough to get a parking place there, then it's going to take you about 10 minutes, they estimate, to walk up the stairs. And if it's at the beginning of a peak day, probably wait 20 or 30 minutes until your turn on the gondola takes you up there. But the biggest resistance, I'm trying to search a word that's not obscene, but I grew up as a caddy at Salt Lake Country Club, and I learned three things: don't throw your clubs, don't bet, and don't join a country club. But they will have, at the end of the day, and I've skied at Alda since 1956. They didn't have safety bindings, and my entire ski outfit cost my parents $45. They now have $12,000 skis. Anyway, they at the end of the day, people, especially on a good powder day, like to ski until the very last minute. So you can imagine the crowd that will be waiting in line for the gondola to take them back down the canyon. And some people estimate that will take certainly more than 2 or 3 hours, given the capacity of the gondola. And of course, everybody will recognize that there is justice in the way we provide transportation. So everybody in the valley who can afford approximately $35 a round trip will be able to take the gondola. And I venture to ask how many in this room would be willing to pay $35 for a round trip. And then I think the pass now is going to be $150 at Alda, and it's $300 at Deer Valley. Like golf, skiing is pricing itself out of the market. And that's where Carl's point is so important. More and more people are discovering the beauty of hiking and climbing, and in the winter, backcountry skiing. And we ought to be doing something to make sure that they have appropriate safety in place. My son is a big backcountry skier, and he was skiing the day in Mill Creek when 4 people were killed by an avalanche. Of course, my son, being him, didn't ever tell his parents that he was safe, so we fretted until about 7 o'clock at night. And we need to have better safety precautions, both in the summer and in the winter. I've been to school in Austria, and there they have a group of young people, men and women, who hike the trails and are providing assistance to people. We ought to have that same thing for the Central Wasatch. My point is, the figure I've heard is 1.2 billion. I'll certainly accept 1.4, but spending that much money is just outrageous. There is a group that I started, Friends of Alta, with the mayor, Bill Levitt, and his wife, Mimi, in 1980. And they are, there is a new group called Guardians of the Canyons. And if you want to keep track of what's going on in the litigation, right now we're at 57 pages. And I think it'll be about 78 or 80 by the time we're done. I did write my third-year law paper in 1974 on NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. And because of the school I was at, we could interview Senator Muskie, Senator Baker, and the senator from Senator Aiken from Vermont, who were the main authors. And their main purpose was to make sure that on any federally funded project, there was an objective, thorough analysis of that project's impact on the environment, water, birds, animals, and what's happened. And I say this because I was head of a federal agency for in the Clinton administration, is when people retire from the Forest Service or BLM or Fish and Wildlife, they generally go into being a consultant on writing EISs because they've always been on the other side, having to judge them, and now they know or they think they know what kind of EIS should be done. And so the consultant firm that UDOT hired, I think, just was told this is what the conclusion we want, and manipulate the data to have it go that way. And 2 major concerns I have is water. 17% of Salt Lake County's water comes from Little Cottonwood Canyon, 18% from Big Cottonwood Canyon, and I think it's about 25% from Parley's Canyon. When you begin tinkering with watersheds, you do not understand how immediate the damage can be to cleaning the water and having it reliably available. And we have not had a significant EIS study on the impact of the water. There are 2 Superfund sites that are going to be disturbed at the base, and we don't have that anywhere in the EIS. So I'm concerned. I see the nature of Utah politics and the control that some legislators have in doing things that are self-serving and are not looking out for Utah taxpayers or the growth in the future that needs to be planned so that our children or grandchildren will have something similar to what we had as we grew up. Thank you.
So I could come up with some questions to put to our guests to harass them. But I know there are so many people online and in the room that may want to ask questions. I think I should turn it to the audience at this point. We have about another 15 minutes for questions from the audience. And I mean questions, not testimonials. Come up to the mic.
Yeah, just hit the button.
I guess this is to Carl and Pat. Do you believe that a case study being done, or do you believe that it would be helpful if a case study was done on mobility hub solutions like Carl presented on the Wasatch Front as a whole systematic solution to provide what buses could look like and what the economic benefit would be, as well as the reduction in traffic congestion and air quality.
The reason the electric bus came to demonstrate it could get up Little Cottonwood Canyon.
Tara,
Yeah, the UDOT told me that they just wouldn't make it. It was not that powerful. And so I called up this California company and they brought their bus here. We loaded it up at the Capitol. We went up the canyon, and then when it came down, it regenerated part of the power it had used. So I think a case study would be wonderful if you look at the whole, not just one very small sliver. And that's what we're doing now, is we're going to solve this problem, but then all these other problems are going to expand.
I guess I would say yes and no. Yes, because I think we absolutely need to look at actual solutions. But I say no, because UDOT has made its decision and has demonstrated it is unwilling to hear anything outside of what it has decided. And those things need to be challenged in a court of law, as the governor recently refused to, at the urging of every local jurisdiction that's impacted by this decision, asked the governor to disagree better, and he said no. So that I don't think, when you are trying to fight studies with policy, studies lose every time.
Did you want a follow-up question?
yeah, I understand your point there with policies versus legislation. If we're able to demonstrate that there is an alternative solution, do you believe that legislation would be able to get involved away from the governor or UDOT for funding in a situation like that?
Having observed the legislature since 1976, it's gone from being quite reasonable when people like Warren Pugh or Barlow were there, or Bob Garf. It really did approach things in a fiscally responsible way. Now, what's happened for at least the last 10 years is the last 72 hours, all the deals that were made in November at the interim meeting are popped up and passed without any serious examination. And it's just outrageous. And I see myself as a senior citizen trying to recruit people to run for public office. We are only going to get these things changed if we have good people stepping up and saying, I want to run for office. Now, as my wife said, who in their right mind would want to be a public official? So I think that's an uphill battle. Another observation about our planning process, I often joke that we have too many parishes because they each keep separate jurisdiction, and water is a great example. There are at least 5 state agencies, 4 federal agencies, and each county has 2 agencies that oversee water. And as a lawyer who has represented developers on occasion, one of your main tools is play off these different jurisdictions as to who's going to win out.
And I guess I would just say real quick that we have, when UDOT made this decision, they said they were going by a phased approach. That was the message we heard in July of this, still this year. In the recent weeks, their message has shifted to say we will do whatever is funded first. So they're not bound by this phased approach. That was lip service and kind of we've called it a dog and pony show to try and help the gondola slide down our throats a little bit more easy. But we met with the House chair of the Transportation Committee, and he's hell-bent on running a bill to fund the gondola first because he doesn't believe in phases 1 and 2. So I think we can study all we want, but there will be an effort by the state legislature to fund this grotesque infrastructure that doesn't solve any problems, that helps billionaire ski resort owners on the shoulders of taxpayers.
Thank you.
I think UDOT has, Josh Jura from UDOT has been quoted as saying that following phase 1 and phase 2 would be a way to find out whether buses are going to be adequate. And if they were adequate, the gondola shouldn't be pursued. I mean, that's Josh Jura is the project manager from UDOT. That's his public
He
position,
was.
whether that's what he
was.
really.
He no
Yeah,
longer
Josh
is.
is no longer on the, he's moved up and Devin is now the project manager on the project. And he has stated that it's gonna, like, they can only work on what is funded. So if any phase is funded not in sequence, then he is able to work on that project.
Well, and the 800-pound gorilla, so to speak, is the Olympics. I served on the executive board of the Olympics to bring it here in 2002. Tom Welch had asked me to do it. I agreed. And then about 6 months in, I resigned because he kept lying to me. And Jack Gallivan, who was the publisher of the Tribune, and he's known me since I was born, called me up and he said, "Pat, we're having lunch today." And I was reprimanded for not being supportive of the Olympic bid. And then President Clinton named me to be the liaison between federal law enforcement and state law enforcement. And I watched the whole scandal unravel. And I think that the time schedule will get flipped so that we'll have that trump card, no pun intended, to get people to get the bid in 2030 or maybe 2034.
So I think it's quite obvious we've answered the first question, should there be a gondola in Little Cottonwood Canyon? To hit a little further on the second question of can it be stopped? I know a lot of citizens feel hopeless right now, but we don't want to give up on Little Cottonwood. Aside from Mayor Mendenhall referenced talking to your legislators, is it safe to assume that they're all pro gondola? Is there somewhere where we can find a list like citizens can access, you know, who's supportive and who isn't, and that way we can more strategically direct our efforts into letting them know that this is not what the people want?
Well, one group in our alliance has a very effective lobbyist, and they're trying to identify those members of the House or Senate who would be willing to do it. And through a group that's supporting the lawsuit, we also are going to make 5 trips throughout all 29 counties of the state of Utah. Mike Levitt and I did that in 1988 to defeat propositions A, B, and C that Merrill Cook was saying to take 60% of our tax revenue out. And we flipped it by November, 70% voted against it. And the basic question to a county commissioner or to a mayor of Panguitch, you know, what would you do with your share of $1.4 billion? And I think they will react. So we are going to be looking for volunteers to go on those trips. And I can give you the webpage of Guardians of the Canyon, and they'll be coordinating that. But thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Those would be helpful resources too for folks who want to share their opinion, but maybe can't travel as well. So thank you.
Professor Nichols.
Let's see, there's one player we haven't been talking about at all. And I spent this morning looking over the forest plan. So we've not been talking about the Forest Service. The Forest Service has been a silent member of this. And as simple of things as the view shed rating for lower Little Cottonwood Canyon is very high. And when you read the description or you look at the images of the towers that will run up the canyon, that only fits under their low category. So it doesn't fit under high, it doesn't fit under moderate, it doesn't fit under anything but low. That's just one of the things that's in the forest plan. And we are occasionally hearing about the Forest Service releasing their own record of decision. And I'm assuming, and what I'm asking now of you two, is have you heard, is that really just going to be changes in the forest plan to adjust to fit the gondola? Or are they going to be actually talking about the EIS?
There are three approaches the Forest Service has, in my judgment. The first is to do as they are required by their own regulations, an independent EIS of the impact of the proposed federal project. From talking with some friends in the Forest Service here and some in Washington, that's probably not likely. BLM and Forest Service are enormously underfunded and understaffed, and they just don't have the time or the money to get it done. Second, and I think this is what UDOT is hoping for, if you read the 420-page EIS, there are a number of points at which state basically the Forest Service was shoulder to shoulder with us as we went through and basically agreed with everything that is here. In the lawsuit, not to break any confidences, we initially are not going to file them as a defendant. If they fail to do their regulatory required EIS, I think it would be wise to include them. But again, Snowbird and ALDA have lobbyists in Washington. And so I often have wondered whether or not what pressure is being brought here is simply being countered in Washington, D.C. Well, they used to be smoke-filled rooms, but now I'm not sure what they're filled up other than hot air.
We have a question online, I think.
Yeah, we have two online. The first one's for Tammie. It is this, Clean Cities is listed as having endorsed the gondola. Can you explain a little more about why?
I think that that's inaccurate as far as endorsing the gondola. We're interested in innovation. We're interested in alternative transportation technologies. We were a big proponent of seeing Proterra go into Zion National Park. They, like a lot of new technologies, now they're going to battery. They're no longer a busing company. They filed Chapter 13. It's an emerging field. We know that electric buses are going to be able to do the job. We're seeing them do the job in Zion National Park, not Proterra, but I mean, electric buses. So do we support the gondola? We support innovation. And there are many components of the gondola that are innovative and that it is scalable. And it is possible for the gondola to make multiple stops. It is possible for the gondola to haul freight. The gondola can be an entire transportation system, in addition to ground surface transportation. That's what I do. My whole world is transportation on the ground. I work a little bit with aviation fuels, but so to look at the gondola as an innovative solution for avalanches, that was originally that was presented to me. How can we solve for avalanches? And if road transportation doesn't work, which in many ways and in many studies it has been shown that it has not worked in the canyon, can we change that? Yes, we can. Does there need to be a system that feeds into the canyon, very much like what was said? We need to have transportation hubs. We're doing the same thing with Zion National Park. There's no way we can bring all that transit there. How do we get them there? There has to be transportation hubs. If we're going to go electric, there has to be microgrids. There has to be hydrogen to fulfill those microgrids as well, right? So transportation is hugely complex. It's not, these are all emotional topics. Politics are emotional topics. Politics have all of their, just like Pat was saying, there's all kinds of politics happening around these subjects. But transportation itself, we have the largest transportation system in the world. So I would hope people would lean more into the technologies and transportation, the facts around emissions. It didn't just arrive these decisions to look at the gondola, to look at busing, those are all very complex systems. UTA has a very complex system. The front runner, right? It runs on electric. Those engines are currently run by diesel, right? So that's a fix we're working on. We're working on innovative train sets right now with hydrogen. That's exciting. So I looked at the gondola as innovation, as electric transportation. That was not surface transportation. Surface transportation has lots of complexities. We talk about watershed, we talk about emissions. Think about, these are things that I'm pushing back to the national lab to say, what about, we're looking at tires, right? Look at 12,000 vehicles in the canyon with tailpipe emissions. Those are the things I looked at. With a variety of buses, personal vehicles, snow plows. 95% of all heavy duty transportation in the United States runs on diesel today.
I think we have another question
So
online.
it's
an audience
complex. It's not just easy. It's not just, oh, we can just choose an electric bus.
I would just urge you to not just look at the innovation, but look at the problem and look at the scope and scale of the problem.
Exactly.
Let's look at the avalanche problem. It's 11 days a year on average. Okay.
And last year there were 93 and 39 that shut the
Right,
road.
we can look at the outliers too, but look at the problem. 11 days. I worked in Little Cottonwood Canyon. 11 days per year is the avalanche problem.
And I want to say, the reason why
75% of the traffic in that canyon will continue to be on that road. The gondola will provide the best view of the red snake in the entire Wasatch.
Well, and so saying, what about the transportation on the road? Are we going to continue that? Or are we going to say we're going to put buses there? What's the solution to that? This is again why we were asked to look at it, because it's very similar to Zion National Park, right? A lot of people traveling and wanting to be in personal cars ultimately.
Really, really quickly, a follow up on that, and then I have another question from the audience really quick. One of our audience members on Zoom discussed the fact, which I think you kind of stipulated, Tammie, that UDOT only compared diesel buses to the gondola. And so I think your study looked at electric, if I understood what you said. Is that correct?
All the fuels. We looked at renewables. We looked at the potential for hydrogen. Well to wheels. We don't just look at what's on the road and those emissions. We look at what is the source of it and where's the end, right? And also further cradle to cradle, right? What's the end point? So we don't just look at just this bus running up the road. We look, where did the fuel come from? What's the electric grid system? Because in all fairness, they were looking at the electric grid system for the gondola as increasingly becoming renewables. You have to look at that with electric buses increasingly becoming renewables, right? So we always look at the whole perspective with data.
But remember, it's 30% more, not 30% less. 30% more people in the canyon. It's not relieving, it's just making room for more vehicles on the road.
And that's a true issue. And again, that's why I compared it to Zion National Park. Increasing transportation in the park does not solve the problem for the park. It just puts millions of people in the park. So, having a perfect transportation system for Little Cottonwood Canyon, it just puts more people in the canyon.
Shauna, did you have another
to have
question
those-
from someone online and then somebody else in our audience?
Yeah, and I'm not really sure who this would be to, but they're just wondering, do any of you happen to know briefly, what has the LDS Church said about UDOT's right to their airshed? Does anybody have knowledge about that?
I have represented the LDS Church, so I don't feel comfortable commenting on that. The leadership is very intent on focusing on their global obligations and duties and try to keep out of local political issues as they see it.
I can say there was a public letter sent to the Central Wasatch Commission a couple of years ago that it's a public record and anybody could request it, but it was sent from the church, and they expressed significant concern with the gondola because it would provide a safety concern to the vaults. Also, the towers will require eminent domain on the church's property.
Question from the audience.
Yes, I think we're all here listening to some good facts and figures and everything, but it kind of ended up being the real problem is UDOT, right? The real problem is maybe the legislature and funding. The real problem is a governor who is silent on a lot of issues. I've been involved for the last 2 years with grassroots, a lot of information about stopping other things that pollute our air. And whether this is a real polluter or a real non-polluter or whatever, the big question is, what do we do about UDOT? What does the panel suggest, all of us out here and all of our friends and neighbors, what can we do? What's the best thing we can do? Because every time I've written a letter, no one's ever responded. And I've written probably 15 letters to this and that and all these things. What's this? What if the problem is UDOT and the problem is the governor and the problem is the legislature might just fund 1.2 billion, 1 point whatever billion and just go right to the gondola and skip all the buses? Well, that's not what we want to hear today. We want to hear what can we do from the panel that you think can make the biggest impact and the biggest help and try to straighten this out and let them or convince them that they need to listen to better facts and figures. Thanks.
I walk and ride a bike. You put gas in your tank and you're funding UDOT. But I will say UDOT works for the governor and their budget is set by the legislature. Okay. The president of the Senate, the Speaker of the House, and the governor endorsed the gondola years ago. UDOT is following marching orders. UDOT knows who butters its bread. And so UDOT is following orders. They are, in some regards, catching arrows, and I believe rightfully so. But at the end of the day, they were directed by the president of the Senate, the Speaker of the House, and the governor of the state of Utah to build that gondola. And they're good soldiers and they follow orders.
If I could follow up, Secretary Bostick has been out here a couple of times to look at the new airport, and whether it's the Department of Transportation or the GAO, the General Accounting Office that's run by Congress, there needs to be an audit of the Utah Department of Transportation. And behind the scenes, there is a bureaucratic battle going on between UTA and UDOT. UDOT would like to be in charge of all transportation plans in the state, and UTA is an independent authority. And what's happened with UTA's unwillingness to experiment, then you begin to have these small regional transportation systems, like in Summit County and Wasatch County, that are actually more effective. So we, in part of our preparation for the litigation, we sent a grandma request, Government Records Act, and we just got a response last week. They estimated it would take 9,250 hours at $40 an hour, and so we have to pay $310,000 with a down payment of $10,000, or they're not going to give us their records. So I helped write Grandma, and it's been totally turned on its head. We are going to appeal it to the State Records Committee, but it's that kind of arrogant power that just drives me crazy. I've worked in Hong Kong and a bunch of other places overseas, and I've seen corruption there. The difference is everybody knows the rules. Here, it's just a nice veneer but then you scratch beneath it, it says corrupt as Hong Kong or Bangkok or some of these other places, in my judgment.
Okay, with that encouraging analysis, we're going to take a final comment from the audience, and then each speaker can give, let's say, a 1-minute wrap up. Sir?
Is there any way maybe a statewide referendum could be, not that they listen to them, I mean, I understand, but I mean, at least we're getting a conversation piece out there. I was just wondering, and then I know that I've lived and worked in Little Cottonwood for 40+ years off and on. And I mean, they have 10 deep tram lines right now, and that tram will be moved slower, as slow as the gondola would be. And that's a 2-hour wait, bare minimum. And I don't know if we've ever discussed any of the impacts on the 2 adjacent wilderness areas that parallel Highway 210. There's so many other things, you know. They used to have carrying capacities and skiers at one time in the EISs that the Forest Services required the skiers to not overbuild or have. So there's so many things that I'm just saying we have some ammunition. I appreciate what you're doing, Pat, and everyone up here and you on alternative. I've worked with solar electric cars since the '89, you know, and so I appreciate the innovation you're trying to bring here. So just kind of throwing out some stuff. And as a realtor, not only is the LDS airspace, but any other private entity that owns land, you basically own the bundle of rights from the property line to infinity. So there will be other people's property rights that will be impacted, and those can't be stepped on.
Anybody on the panel want to provide a brief
Sorry.
answer to that question if you found the question there?
There are many there.
I would hope that you would take it upon yourself to talk to your family, your extended family, your neighbors, your relatives, whomever you can talk to, because voices can make a difference, but they have to be coordinated. In the politics of today, I've been a federal investigator 4 different times, and one of the first lessons I learned was follow the money. And indeed, that's what we need to do here, and do it in a transparent way so we can see who's benefiting and who's paying.
Did you want to add anything as your final 1-minute statement? Or was that it?
No. Please vote, and please get involved in the political process. It's not a pleasant thing. I have a very thick skin, so I'm not bothered sometimes. My wife, who was here briefly, will not go to any political rallies. The only reason she came today was I asked her special. So that I've given up on that.
Carl?
Sure. I mean, stay engaged. There was, I think it was Brock Evans. He was a longtime conservation advocate, said endless pressure, endlessly applied. And I think that has been the tried and true recipe. And I appreciate entities like the League of Women Voters, who provide forums to learn, get information about this stuff. But organizations such as, Save Our Canyons or other entities working on different issues in this space can be a conduit. They can be an innovator. They can be an incubator of ideas, but it takes individuals. We need a united front rather than the point of a spear. And I would encourage people to continue to think globally and act locally on these issues, because I've talked to so many intelligent, passionate people, and many of you here tonight, and I hope others are online, but continue to use your voice, continue to engage. It's really meaningful. And there is not a list of legislators or policymakers. It's all of them. Don't focus your efforts. Grow your networks.
And then we'll turn to Ms. Bostick, and then I have some brief, boring announcements for the environmental group here, but not for the league group, about next league activities.
I just want to again, thank you all for being here and being interested. Be interested in policy, be interested in the policies that affect your lives, be deeply interested in the transportation because it's the most important decisions that we will make as a nation moving forward. Take the time to read the national blueprint and what the Biden administration has put forth for us to cut our emissions in transportation. I mean, we could talk for hours about why transportation is so political. I mean, almost every engagement we are involved with overseas, our military is because of transportation and oil. So that's what our program does, is work to lessen our dependence on foreign oil, use stateside fuels, and make sure that they are renewable and green propulsion as we move forward. Also look at the innovation that UTA is doing today, along with our universities. I mean, it's easy to say they're not doing a lot. I see them doing a lot because I work with them. I'm working on a hydrogen train set with them. They are innovative. They are trying. Listen to what Jay Fox says. Every choice he makes is to make a green choice to work to have his entire fleet be green propulsion. So there are a lot of great things to be hopeful around, and the innovative things that are going to make phase one work is going to be busing, but not just for the canyon. And again, as I said, it's going to be the whole collect of how we pull people to the bus and around our cities, right? And around our neighborhoods. What are our feeders? What are those take interest in transportation. I mean, we all want to be able to take public transportation. It's not in that place right now. So again, yeah, I mean, and also look at your bipartisan Clean Air Caucus. They're all about listening to the issues related to clean air. And it's bipartisan, 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats. It's a great way to be engaged with clean air issues and environmental issues. So I encourage you to engage that way. Thank you.
Thank you, speakers, members, guests, for attending in person and online. Everyone who found tonight's event useful, take a few minutes to like or share our related posts on Facebook, Twitter. It's not Twitter anymore. X. And Instagram. This will be pardon? No, thank you. This will be posted on our website in a short while. This has been a general meeting. The league also has unit meetings, smaller groupings that get together to talk about more about some of the issues we've dealt with here tonight and other issues. I just want to highlight the next unit meetings that are coming up. Night Owls meet on the 4th Monday of the month, which is Monday, November 27th at 7:30 at Holiday Library and online. Summit Wasatch County unit meets the last Tuesday of the month, Tuesday, November 28th at 11 a.m. on Zoom. This month's topic is the Utah Agricultural Optimization Project, Reducing Water Usage to Preserve the Great Salt Lake. A discussion with Hannah Fries, environmental scientist and the manager of the optimization project, something I'm sure anybody is invited to. Nightingales meets the last Tuesday of the month, Tuesday, November 28th at Judy Short's home at 7:30 p.m. There will be a holiday social Wednesday, December 6th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Holiday City Hall. This will be a potluck and we'll be collecting donations for the Utah Food Bank. Watch for an invitation. Finally, the Town Club meets the first Thursday of the month. Next meeting will be December 7th at 11 a.m. in person at the Town Club. The program will be followed by an optional lunch. People wishing to attend should contact Kathy Beeley. And then finally, stay tuned for our next general meeting. It will be in January. It will be combined with the Utah League meeting, and we'll be considering the upcoming legislative session. So this is just whet our appetite for that meeting. Time and date to be announced. Thank you all.
One last thought. Education has to precede transportation.